Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. Here we go.
Hey, good morning, Justin.
Good morning, Mr. Mark.
Good
How are
to
you?
see you. I am well, thank you.
I am well as well. You should tell the audience that you brought your slippers over here for a permanent stay.
I did. I have my childhood slippers here practically. They just, they've been living in the back of my closet for a long time, and your office is a good spot for them to stay.
Yeah, I've been enduring the smell.
Yeah,
so.
Well, I appreciate that.
No smell. But yeah, just making ourselves at home. Today we're going to talk a little bit about humor.
Yes, we are.
I like that forced laughter. It made me laugh.
Oh, no,
so.
that wasn't.
Oh,
that wasn't.
All right.
Laughter is good.
It is good, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my big question to you, Mark, why is this topic so important?
I think it's important to me, because I think we can lose sight of humor in the process of our busy lives, and it's even a personal goal, I think, of mine to add humor, to be intentional about adding moments of humor into my day. And I don't think it's probably been a couple months or so. Chris and my wife and I were talking about wishing we hadn't taken life so seriously when our kids were younger. Mm-hmm. You know, I think over time, taking ourselves less seriously has increased our desire for humor. You know,
how does that play out? Like, what are some things that, practically speaking, that you could have seen it be different? I'm just curious, as I don't know.
I think in a lot of cases, when we were talking in that process with our kids, we even like aspects of discipline, or when somebody was in trouble, you know, it was a serious moment, you know, and everybody had to feel the weight of what they did, you know, that kind of thing. And just in hindsight, that's not, had I known, that wouldn't have been an environment I wanted to create. You know, in this aspect of, you know, shame and guilt. I just, you know, I don't think it's as powerful as we might think it is. But I think humor has the ability to laugh at yourself when you make a mistake. Not laugh at hurting other people. There's a big difference there. And I'm not sure our culture always, you know, understands that or does that well. But, you know, to actually make life a little lighter at times, because I think it has the tendency to be heavy enough on its own. What about for you?
Well, that's good. I mean, yeah, in terms of answering the question, I have some thoughts, but I also was just thinking about humor in our family and that kind of thing. And I think there's also a balance on the other side where our family can be a little sarcastic.
Okay, sure.
And sometimes it's really funny. Like my middle daughter, she can pull out some zingers and, you know, perfectly timed, deadpan, and it's funny. And then there are other times when she does it and the context is inappropriate.
Sure.
And so we're like, and just so you know, the sarcasm doesn't come from Megan. She didn't learn it from Megan. So I'm trying to figure out how to like balance that and like appreciate it, but also not help her to understand the context of when it's acceptable. And
how would you define the difference between humor and sarcasm?
Well,
What makes
sarcasm can be humorous, right? I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Okay.
But I believe that sarcasm has a lot higher danger factor than just, you know, the word humor, right? Like I think sarcasm is a form of humor, and used right can bring levity to some serious moments. Kind of even thinking about what you were just talking about, how sometimes my kids will do something and I'll be a little sarcastic about, you know, about how they should do it different. And rather than like going into this severe reprimand mode, I kind of just tweak at them, like tease a little bit. And I mean, I'd love to have an objective listener sometimes, because I think sometimes it's too much. You know, sometimes it shifts over to kind of that dangerous sarcasm. And to me, the difference there is when that person basically, are you making the situation better or worse?
Yeah.
You know? And sarcasm often has the capability and potential for making the situation worse for the person you're being sarcastic to at their expense, right?
Yes.
Where other people, you know, around the situation, or even myself, the person being sarcastic, feels like, you know, we're getting some social mileage out of that joke or that sarcasm. The person I'm directing it to, not so much, right? Like
exactly.
And I think that's the difference for me.
Sure.
But I think sarcasm can be a nice form of humor if done right, to the point where the person receiving it feels like that at least feels better than the alternative, which might be a significant, you know, serious reprimand or whatever. And it's more of a playful, like, hey, remember, do this thing kind of thing.
And I'm thinking about, would you say teasing and sarcasm are the same, or because I'm thinking of that nuance between humor. We can kid, we can tease, and then for me in that spectrum, that continuum, if you will, sarcasm might go just a little further than those things. And I think, and for me, I think between Chris and I would recognize that sarcasm is likely, you know, kind of off limits to us.
Gotcha.
And I think that's, you know, that's why I'm asking the questions to a certain degree, because I think, you know, there is a cost to someone in sarcasm, whereas I see humor, no one has to pay a price. We can both, you know, interact with that, and it's okay to laugh, and it's okay for us to have fun, and there's no cost to an individual when humor's involved. But I also recognize there's room for kidding and teasing and these, you know, these personal, like, interactions of a family where, I can think of, you know, some words that I don't say well, you know, and my family knows those words. And, you know, when
which ones, Mark?
I have to work at it, but parlor is a word that is typically hard for me to say.
Okay. Well, you said it amazingly.
Well, I had to enunciate because I have to think about it. But you know, that's one of those words. But yes, over time, that has probably gone from more of a teasing to a humor that I'm able to, say, okay, I don't have to take myself so seriously, you know? And I have these weaknesses, these things that I, you know, do, faux pas, whatever you want to call them, that I have. And it's okay. And I think time has developed that more, where I don't take myself as seriously as I used to. And I think that's part of the reason Chris and I were having the conversation is we wish we hadn't taken ourselves so seriously as young parents.
Yeah. Do you feel like, or I guess what would you say is the reason that you felt that was necessary, or was it just default? You know?
I think as a default, I think it was we were parenting in some ways the way we were parented. Yeah. You know, and I think, you know, growing up, you know, to a certain degree, life was serious, or it seemed
Yeah.
as if it was. And I can remember, times just kind of getting out and going for, disconnecting, maybe at times to even get out of the seriousness of what was going on.
Wow.
That kind of within the household. I mean, yeah. And I think, for Chris, in that process, I think her background would have been very similar.
Yeah.
To where, family meetings and stuff like that, it's like, something serious is going to happen. You never had a family meeting for a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't.
Yeah.
But so that's I think that's kind of the thing. And, so call it default, call it transgenerational parenting skills, whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I think where it came from.
And some of that is generational, right? Like, especially parents or, people who grew up in the Great Depression. I mean, that was a sobering time, and, everything, like you said, was serious. And so I think that because I know my parents, grew up in the Great Depression, and there was no humor in that generation. I mean,
it wasn't fun.
Very right.
Exactly.
And I don't blame them, of course. Nope. I mean, I can't imagine.
I like the generational perspective on that because it takes out that blame.
Yeah.
We can understand where that seriousness of life comes from. And it's just interesting.
It's also changeable, right? Like when I can recognize, that was a product of, right, for instance, the Great Depression.
Sure.
And I'm not going through the Great Depression.
Yeah,
I don't have to mirror that seriousness,
Yeah. We're not in the midst of that right now.
Right.
So there's no need for that
default behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But life's still hard. And I think that's, you asked me why do I think it's an important topic.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly why. I think life is serious. Life is sobering. And, just yesterday I got a text about someone that we knew and, very much appreciate in Minnesota. Like a close family friend. He got in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
And,
sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And then he got out of his car after it and got hit by another car.
Wow.
And he's in the hospital. And I think about, that stuff happens.
Yes, it does.
More than we want them to, right? Like,
yeah.
And if it's not happening to me, then there's someone close by, right?
Yeah.
And life's hard. Like, life is sobering. We get news like that on a regular basis. And that's not even including if you partake in a diet of daily news, right? Like,
sure.
Which is a whole nother aspect. And, we can have a talk a different day about our thoughts on that. But there's just a lot of negativity in life. And it's just because life can be hard, or your kids come home from school and the grades aren't what they're supposed to be, or they got in a fight or something at school, and so our brain immediately goes to a dark place of like, now I got to deal with this, and how am I a bad parent, or at work, right? Something happens, you don't meet the deadline, and life's hard, right? And so that's, to me, why is it important? I think it's important to maintain a proper balance in our mind. And,
sure.
You use the phrase taking ourselves too seriously. And I think that's a big part of it, is just recognizing that there is room for humor in my struggles.
To be intentional about adding time for, or not taking life or myself so seriously. Yeah, in those moments. And
to be honest, I think it requires some levels of personal leadership to be able to laugh at myself, or because what it requires me to be able to kind of float above myself, right? Like, and look into the situation,
sure,
without being in it, and go, this actually is kind of funny, or I bet in 20 years I'm gonna laugh at this, and even be able to make that comment right now to bring some levity right now. To say, 20 years, I might laugh at this. Right now, it sucks.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Perspective.
Yes. Hey.
Yeah.
How I see it.
That's how I see it. No, but yeah, that ability to recognize, okay, this is momentary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can still be in this moment and recognize that, yeah, it likely is not as serious as I might want to think it is.
Mm-hmm.
But there again, it just kind of comes back to that ability to have that desire to see things differently.
Yeah.
Versus, and I think it can come back to, you know, defensiveness. You know, was I wronged?
Yeah.
You know, those kind of things. I think those moments, it's harder to, you know, have humor because we have to extend that to other people, you know, but I still think it's beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like our kids, you know, like what you're saying with our kids. I think sometimes if we can flip the switch from anger and disappointment to a little bit of humor. And yeah, I do like that you mentioned the nuance between sarcasm and teasing, because I do think there's a difference. And I think probably most of what I was saying as sarcasm is teasing. But those lines can get blurred, obviously.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, that's what it sounded like to me in that process. Because I think of, when I think of sarcasm, I think of great job, Justin.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Where I'm really, I'm just putting a dig in there at you.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make it humorous.
Yeah.
But yet, there's no humor in that.
Yeah.
And if anything, all I've done is undermine your ability to say, was Mark being humorous? Was he being funny? Or was he being sarcastic and he thinks I just did a terrible job?
Yeah.
And then that impacts that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important for me when we think about the difference between humor and sarcasm. Because I think, you know, our culture, if we want to think about it from the aspect of the Great Depression, I would dare say our culture today is very sarcastic.
Yeah.
And we mask that with, oh, I was just kidding.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean,
yeah.
So that's why for me personally it's important to decipher.
Yeah.
This, you know.
So an example of sarcasm, which you might say that's probably not a good thing. That's totally okay. But I think about like my son, and sometimes he'll forget stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I can get frustrated for the 50th time this week that he forgot something. Or I can go, "Hey Joseph, are you trying to warm this milk up for tomorrow, or do you want to put it in the fridge?" And I'll have a little, you know, twinkle in my eye, right? And I'll look at him. And he'll get a big smile on his face. He'll get up. He'll go put it away. You know, and it's like, that's sarcasm.
I hear you.
Right? It's teasing. It's, you know.
Yeah.
But I like to think that it's better for me to handle it that way than the way my natural instinct is, like, to get frustrated and get on them again. And I also like to think that they remember it better. Like, it hits home a little different, right?
Sure.
Where it's not nagging and again.
Yep.
I don't know. And I also very much feel, and again, I think there are trade-offs to these approaches. So I'm not condoning it. Blarch, is that blanc?
Yeah,
Blanche,
carte blanche. Yeah, carte blanche. Yeah. Parlor.
Whatever that word is.
Creek.
I'm not condoning it without any caveats, right?
Yeah.
Crick, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
Caveats, carte blanche.
Caveats, carte blanche, yeah, exactly. Because, again, I've seen my kids... Well, okay, one of the good benefits that I've seen due to this kind of humor is that my kids are very smart and nuanced in understanding that kind of humor, and also are kind of exhibit that same intelligence in their humor towards others. And again, sometimes they demonstrate their lack of intelligence in their choices of when to use their humor. But I'm often very kind of taken aback about like some of the nuanced humor they use and how funny they are, and also how they can recognize nuanced situations as a result of that. And where I guess the counterbalance to that would be some families I grew up around were very sheltered, kind of had that homeschool vibe, and just very pure, right? Like that's a good thing, I guess. But they couldn't understand nuances of humor, and it was like it's hard to explain. But it felt like there wasn't an emotional intelligence there.
Yeah, and
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense because when you were talking about your kids, I'm thinking along that line of developmental humor. You know, how humor is developmental to a certain degree based on how I grow up.
Yeah.
And, you know, because, your young kids are going to say things that aren't appropriate in a desire to create a sense of humor. You know, but they're just developing it, you know, and adolescents are the same way. And I was thinking about it from a developmental standpoint. I think looking back, having had the development that I did, that's what makes good humor all the more valuable to me.
Yeah.
Because I do think of those times maybe when I was trying to tease or I was trying to even use genuine sarcasm that I said, shucks, I probably shouldn't have said that. I didn't need to say that, you know, in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's looking back. And now it's like, okay, now I can really value good humor, the ability, well, like you and I to laugh with one another in such a way that says, life is serious, but we can rise above it maybe to a certain degree because we have hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And relationship.
Yeah.
I think that's a key part of humor.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different kinds of humor, obviously, and there's kind of presentational humor that's just meant to be, you know, funny at no one's expense kind of thing. And then there's relational humor, which is kind of like we're talking about teasing, ribbing, that kind of thing. And those things can fall short if the relationship isn't there, right?
Yes.
And the investment in that relationship hasn't been built, and then it feels very much at the expense. And even when you've have a significant relationship that you invested time, you can humor can still feel like at their expense. I'm just saying, part of relational growth is a humor. You know, ideally,
sure.
A humor can come into play to the. I know you and I will tease each other about different things, and I think that's a great way to say I see you.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I still love you.
Yep.
I appreciate all the quirks, the nuance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like humor done right can say all that. Humor done wrong can go the other direction, of course.
Yeah.
You know, but.
Yeah. And that's where I think it does come back to a developmental learning how humor can be used appropriately and used well. I think about people when you mention relationship. I think about I enjoy being around people who have that ability to make me laugh. You know, you're just attracted to people who have a good sense of humor.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. If you don't mind, real quick, I'll give a background on
go ahead.
Where this topic came to be. When it was last year, I started reading this book called Humor Seriously: Why Humor is a Secret Weapon in Business and Life. And I don't remember who recommended it, but I saw it and I was like, that. And my career has transitioned a little bit more leadership management type stuff, and so I'm like, all of that feels so kind of heavy to me.
Yeah.
And when I saw this, I'm like, I like when I hear in this title, I haven't even read the book, but I like the idea.
I'd like to be like this.
Yes. And so right there, my the gears started turning. Even just reading the title of the book, my gears started turning about how valuable it was in my career and different ways I could I guess, encourage that. And then, started reading the book, and it was really,
Sure.
really good. And there's a lot of good things in there. But, and then as a result, like we've talked about before, I was very involved in Celebrate Recovery. I was
Sure.
Leading that program. And we had a leadership retreat scheduled. And this was an opportunity for all of us to get away and rejuvenate, right? Like after being volunteers in a recovery ministry for a year, years, some of us, to be able to kind of separate from that and go off together and have a good time, relax, retreat, right?
Sure.
And so I was like, this would be a perfect topic to cover in that environment because number one, it's about rejuvenation and kind of, of retreat, right?
Yeah.
But also number two, recovery is so, think about it. It's sobering. Right?
Yeah, no pun intended, or a little bit of
it's
pun intended?
It's
Okay,
intended.
good. Yeah.
That's the thing, though.
Yeah.
Like, sobriety is a serious topic. And the reason it's so serious is because of the consequences of those habits, right?
Sure.
It produces really dire consequences in our lives, often.
Typically shame and guilt, though.
Yes. Yeah. Right. I would say those are the consequences that come as a result of the other consequences, right? Like,
sure.
Because in other words, when you start doing a drug or getting drunk on a regular basis, it feels pretty good at first, and you probably aren't filled with shame, and you probably aren't whatever, but then the consequences start hitting, right? And then you're like, oh crap, maybe I have a problem, and then now the shame, the guilt, and all that, right?
Sure. Your biofeedback loops.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The point is, it's not associated with humor, the idea of sobriety. So the whole concept of how can we bring this back into recovery and how can we make sure that we understand the value of it was something that was what that presentation was about. So some of my notes and stuff come from that, but that was a really fun thing to go over. And part of that whole weekend before every talk, we had everyone read a couple dad jokes, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone had to bring a few dad jokes. And Mark was there, by the way.
I was.
He brought the best dad jokes.
No. I can still remember them, though.
They're good.
Yeah.
All right, give us one.
Oh, what?
Put you on the spot.
Oh, you're putting me right on the spot. What did the... Oh, shucks. It was a green... What did the... Oh, that's right. What did the green grape say to the purple grape?
I can't remember.
Breathe, darn it, breathe!
That's right. It requires all of that.
Yeah.
Energy. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stupid dad jokes. Well, I have two. The first one is, what is brown and sticky?
You want me to answer it? I've been to a stick.
A stick. It's terrible. All right, then my other one that's stupid that cracks me up every time. Where does a general keep his armies?
Oh, all right. In his sleeveys.
In his sleeveys.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, so we required everyone to bring stupid dad jokes like that and read them out loud, and that was a blast. Like, it really, I feel like it changed the whole weekend.
Sure.
Just
added levity.
Yes.
Levity.
Yep. Yeah, and that's it's interesting you bring up that word because that was one of the things we talked about. What's the difference between humor and levity? What are your thoughts, Mark?
Oh, humor and levity. I would say, from my perspective, levity is generated by good humor to a certain degree. I think levity is that ability. Well, maybe it's that definition of what you were describing when we're able to rise above the circumstance. There's a lightness that I feel as opposed to the heaviness of my current circumstance. And I think it's interesting you bring it up in CR because I think in some ways this is what makes this topic important to me, because I recognize the power of humor And yet in a therapeutic setting, I realize how powerful that can be. And I think it's part of what makes this topic so sensitive to me. You know, in that when you're working with someone who's experienced trauma, or, you know, it's like life is serious.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind. So I think there's probably a bond that we share in that desire, like through CR, through therapeutic, and I think, you know, in that process of levity, that's a gift that you can offer someone when you're able to help them rise above. Yeah, and it's a gift because it's something that you can offer, but they don't have to accept it even. It's a choice. And I don't say that in the sense, you know, like someone who's gone through trauma. I'm not saying, you know, you're choosing to stay there. No. But I think it's part of a process that allows me to say, okay, I see how staying in the seriousness is like your friend. It's a serious circumstance, but hopefully in hindsight, as he progresses and heals, it can be something that he's able to say, you know, that was so weird. You know, I was just getting out of my car and all of a sudden I just felt like I was moving and I didn't even know why, you know, that kind from the impact of it. So, you know, having that experience, and I think levity is a gift. And I think it can come from, or is a result of, positive humor, good humor, that is well timed, that is, you know, developed. Yeah. Because I don't think, you know, I think sometimes, well, I think of nervous laughter sometimes, you know, when we're in one of those situations where we're not sure what to do, or that's so serious, we just kind of start laughing, and it's almost like, you know, that. No, but it can be like that. Yeah. You know, when a topic is serious. So I think, it's good. That's a long answer to levity, that's but okay.
I you know, one of the things I appreciate about the idea of levity versus humor is that you don't have to be funny to have levity. Right? Sure. It means you can embrace humor. It means you can embrace the humor in a situation. It means when there's humor going around, you know, you don't have an inclination to put a wet blanket on it, right? Like, all right, let's get back to being serious, right? Sure. And I think anybody can learn the value of levity. Sure. Not everyone can be funny, and that's okay. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that the world doesn't need everyone to be a comedian. True. But if everyone had a spirit, an attitude of levity in life, I think the whole world would benefit. Right? You know what I mean? I do. And of course, levity. So one of my favorite quotes. I'll just say that, I'll read one. One of my favorite quotes from that book is, at every turn, our findings challenge the false dichotomy between gravity and levity, and uncovered the profound benefits of a life fueled by levity. If there's one thing our research makes clear, it's that we don't need to take ourselves so seriously in order to grapple with serious things. And I thought that was so good because life's going to be hard and you're going to have to deal with serious things. It does not require you to turn into this hard person who can, you know, it's a tool to help balance that.
Just on that quote, fueled by levity. What is the fuel of levity as far as you're concerned? What is that? How does a person, and I realize I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm just thinking about it from that aspect of how does a person get fuel, or what is the fuel of levity as you'd see it for those people who have that ability to, you know, lighten a situation or rise above? What is that for you?
Like, what does it practically look like to be fueled by levity?
Yeah, or to how do you gain the, if I'm looking at fuel for a source of levity, where does that fuel come from and what is it?
Well, if I understand this quote, the levity is the fuel. The levity is the thing that you put in your tank that makes you go.
Uh-huh.
Right? So there's not a thing before levity that you put in to then produce levity, although that might be what you're asking.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay,
That's very much what I'm asking.
What fuels the fuel
yes,
of levity?
What fuels that ability to have levity? Because I think levity is something that I bring with me in and of itself.
Yeah.
But
that's a good question, yeah. Well, I think for starters, it's very much like you said, where it's a learned behavior and it's developmental, and I think having levity as the instinctual reaction to a situation comes with time and effort, right?
Sure.
And I also think, going back to relationship, having relationship with people who we can trust and that we love, and to be able to have that happening in that relationship can help teach it. I think without a strong relationship where humor is used well, I don't even know how you learn it, how to use it well. I mean, I guess you can view it from afar, right? Like you can see how your boss treats you or whatever. Like but it really does come down to relationship and seeing it demonstrated in others towards me and or towards others to see, oh, that was good levity. Like that's how I want to be, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the key thing too about levity versus humor is this idea that I can look at a thing and I can go, that's how I want to be. That doesn't mean I have to learn how to be funny like that person.
I don't have to be them.
Yeah. But I can embrace this lightheartedness, you know? And that's what levity means, right? Levitation, like bringing us
rising,
floating, rising. This idea of like lightheartedness versus heaviness. And
I think it's really as we're talking, it's really interesting to think about because honestly, Robin Williams comes to mind for me. You follow me? If you were to view, as I viewed his life from the outside, as you said, from afar, you know, it's like, who wouldn't want to be friends with that guy when he was living? You know what I'm saying? Mrs. Doubtfire, all that good stuff, you know? It's like, and yet I recognize how I'm not sure that was his entire life. And I think, you know, there's something to be said for that ability to be able to say, okay, the balance. How do we always have to bring levity with us into the room? Maybe not.
Right.
And yet at the time, at any given time, it's part of who we are, and it can be pulled out as a gift, as a tool in a positive sense to be able. It's a resource. That's a better word for it. That I have in my repertoire to be able to bring out when it's appropriate. And yet it's not a mask that I put on and inside there is no levity and everything is serious and there's this performance and, you know, that I have to produce, you know, like from a comedian type perspective.
Especially in light of Robin Williams, who ended up, you know, committing suicide. Clearly there's a disconnect between that levity in front of him and whatever is going on, right? In his mind. And I love that because you're basically talking once again about the balance of humor and when it can be bad, right? And I think, you know, we already talked about how when it comes at the expense of others, right, and it hurts someone in the process, then it's bad, right? And then another example is when I'm using it to mask who I really am.
Right.
When I'm using it as a deflection, as a defense system to keep you from getting at the real me, or worse, like I'd love you to know the real me. I don't know how to get to it because I always put this in front of me. you know, and it feels like even when things are starting to get real,
Yeah.
I get nervous, and instead of nervous laughter, I bring in a joke or whatever, and I shift it, right? And that's when humor can go too far, and that's when, instead of increasing a relationship, it creates division, right? It creates...
Yep. Because I think there's a point where our nervousness just makes us talk sometimes. And we end up going to the nonsensical to a certain degree, or that nervous humor that's saying, you know, it's just as you describe that, it's like certain circumstances come to my own mind as far as, you know, that can be something that I observe. It's like, and it's okay to be nervous. Yeah. And just say, okay, I'm nervous. And when I get that way, I tend to talk. And what I might say really might not even make sense. But it's just, I'm uncomfortable with silence. Yeah. Not me personally, but being able to admit that, but there again, I think that is a great opportunity for humor to be involved when other people are uncomfortable with the silence around them, and to be able to say, you know, something that offers levity when all those around me are feeling that nervousness or that, you know, and yet there again, it's not something I have to do, but it's something I can offer. And being able to recognize that life doesn't have to be serious all the time, but yet there's moments that are serious. Yeah. And I think that's where humor can be, or is, a gift that we have to offer. And I think that's what makes it important to you and I.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, as you were talking, I was just thinking about the difference between being, you know, in the perceived place of power versus a perceived place of the other side, whatever that is, right? Sure. So even thinking about like counseling, therapy, that kind of thing, it's a gift as the counselor to give that, right? That levity. And whereas the other side is often like we said, a defense mechanism of feeling nervous. It might be like making a joke, and it takes you out of the moment. But on the other side of that, as the person kind of probing or whatever, to breathe air into that situation through humor, or to provide that opportunity to take some, you know, some of the pressure, the air pressure out, and relieve a little bit of it through a little joke here and there, is a good thing, I think. Yeah.
And what you described to me is that definition of humor, to the point that there's always a little bit of truth in all humor. And I think that's a normalization process that, you know, when we're able to identify with someone and say, I've experienced something similar to that, and I lived through it, and this is the funny story that kind of comes out of that for me. Yeah. You know, because then at that moment, there's a normalizing that goes along, and it's like, I'm not the only one that's messed up, and I can even look at myself, and someday I may even be able to laugh about this.
Yeah, it's good. That reminds me of a good quote from Maya Angelou, right? Is that how you say her name?
Yeah, it's close enough by me. I completely understand.
I gotta find it. She basically said, she was in an interview with Oprah Winfrey, and she said that only equals laugh with each other. Yeah. So again, if you're in that position of authority, or again in therapy, it's not really authority, but you know what I'm saying, you're kind of on that side of the desk, so to speak. When you are able to laugh with them, you bring them up to your level, and I think that's a really cool, or can, right? Yeah. I think that's a cool concept.
You bring them up, or you're able to go down, even, would be a way I'd look at that. You know, it's like if I'm elevated, if I may be elevated in a circumstance, I can also recognize that I'm very much the same. I'm only elevated in this circumstance because I'm just as human. I'm just as broken. Yep. Outside of this circumstance as you are. And I think that's the part from my perspective that would make us equals. Yeah. You know? Yeah. because
Absolutely.
I'm able to recognize, okay, because I think of the comedy, comedians, they may be elevated, but yeah, it's the fact that we share this similar experience that makes us equals.
Yeah. The quote there is that laughter is the great equalizer.
Yes.
Right? It's essentially what you're saying. Up or down is kind of irrelevant. It's about coming to the same plane.
Exactly.
And be able to connect together in that relatability. And yeah, it's good.
Well, thanks for sharing.
My pleasure.
We didn't even necessarily get into all the brain chemistry that goes along with it, but
maybe we can do humor part 2.
A part there could possibly be a part 2.
Stay
tuned.
Yeah, exactly. There's never too much humor, so we could do humor part 3, 4. But 5,
I would dare
7.
say, of the two of us, you are the closest on that end of comedy relief, comic relief.
That's very generous and kind of you.
Yeah, I've never seen myself as much of a comedian.
I
might have the ability to make people laugh by how I pronounce words and other things that I do, but
Levity, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
it's a little laugh.
That's correct.
Well, good.
This is how we see it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.